So today we are getting our roses ready for summer. If you can see here, this is the remnants of our winter protection, which is a pile of compost around the crown of the rose to keep it safe from the cold. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to pull this compost away from the rose and start to work it into the soil. You want to make sure that you pull all of the compost away from the top of the rose here so that it doesn't start to rot. Now if you have a hand cultivator or a soil knife, you can use that to break up the soil around the rose. I'm just going to use my hands for now. Now that we have all the compost pulled away from the crown of the rose, we're going to start pruning. So you want to start, I like to start at the base, and the first thing you want to look for is any dead wood. So right now the dead wood is going to be very obvious. It's going to be brown or black or even gray in color. I can see this right here. This is all dead. This is all brown. This is all dead. This is nothing. So I'm going to cut it right at the base of that cane. So now I'm just going to go through and I'm going to prune off any dead wood that I see on this plant. So now that I've pruned out pretty much all of the big pieces of dead wood on this, I'm going to start to look at any branches that are crisscrossing or rubbing on each other. And we want to clear these out of the way because when they rub, when they cross, they create wounds, and the wounds can let in diseases, insects, fungus, things like that that we don't want. So if you can come in closer and see the middle of this plant here, you can see a lot of different canes are crossing. So we have two crossing here. We have another one under here that is actually forking this. There, and then we have some other, if you look closer in here, there's some other ones that are gonna be touching. If not this season, then the next growing season they definitely would be. So we need to get rid of all of these crossing pieces. We need to make this rose open and airy so that air and light can get through. So I'm going to start with that. So sometimes this can be tricky because you don't know which cane should stay and which cane should go. And you want to kind of think about it a little bit, but not too much, because this plant is going to grow back. So if you cut something off and maybe it was the wrong cut, not a big deal. Mother Nature, it's going to do its job and it's going to regenerate. But I want to start with these two right here. So this cane is growing out. This cane is starting to grow in, and I can see where it has gone. It's kind of creating a lot of problems further up the road here. So this is going to be a big cut, and it's going to take out a big chunk of this rose. But I think that this is the answer in this situation. So I'm just going to go for it, and I'm going to cut this whole big cane out. Like so. And you want to be careful when you're pulling it out, because you don't want to break off any buds. So I just kind of will chop it into pieces, and that makes it easier to pull out of this tangled web of rose here. So that was a pretty big piece, but we can see already how much more open it is becoming. So let's continue. This is a problem situation here. This piece is dead, so it's actually crumbling away. And then these two down here, they're not really doing much. They're not adding anything. They're creating problems. So I'm going to go right from the base of this, and I'm going to get rid of this whole chunk. And you want to make as clean a cut as possible. If you don't have a pruner that's big enough, you could use a lopper or even a small handsaw. And I'm going to pull that away, and now look at what we have. I see these two canes here. Right now they're small, they're not touching, but they will grow bigger eventually and they will be touching. So I think I'm just gonna get rid of the top one so that the bottom one has room to grow. Now, I see that these canes back here are growing into the plant. I'm just gonna take these away. They're not gonna do anything good in the long run. So we're just gonna get rid of them. Probably get rid of this one as well. So again, just creating more space, more airflow, a nice open center where everything is growing out to the side. So I have taken out a big chunk, as you can see here, of the middle of this plant, and now it's very open, vase-like you could say. But we still have some congestion up here. So now what you can do, you can see that the buds are opening and we have new growth starting here, and this is where you can really manipulate the way that the plant grows. So let's take these two for example. They're beginning to grow towards each other. Eventually they'll be hitting, they'll be rubbing, and we don't want that. So what we can do is we can look at the direction that the buds are going. So I'm gonna look at this one here. This bud is growing this way, which means that any new growth that comes off of it is going to grow in this direction and not in this direction, which is going to end up hitting this. So I'm gonna cut this down to right here, right above this bud, and I'm gonna manipulate the growth of this to go in that direction. And you can use that technique to really make this plant the way that you want it to look. And then so I'm gonna maybe thin these out a little bit. The last bit of pruning I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna lop off these old, this is a previous year's bud or flower, what used to be a flower, and I'm just gonna make sure that I snip all of these off. And this is gonna help the plant redirect its energy to something more useful rather than wasting it on these old nubs. What I like to do is I like to make sure that I touch every cane. That way I know that I haven't missed any. You're almost checking yourself, checking your own work here. So I'm touching them, I'm looking at them. And now I've gone through every single one. So I know that I've gotten them all. Now the last step of this is going to be fertilizing. So we are going to use this organic rose tone. You always, before you use any product, you want to read the label and read the directions. It's going to tell you here that an established plant wants to be fed monthly from the beginning of the growing season to the middle of September. Right now we're in April, and obviously things have begun to grow already, so we're going to start now. One plant gets about a cup and a quarter. So I'm just going to sprinkle the rose tone around the drip line of the plant. And I'm just eyeballing a quarter of a cup, but you could use the real measurements if you feel more comfortable that way. And then I'm just going to work this fertilizer into the soil here. Along with the compost from last winter. And now I'm going to be careful not to cover the top here. And just start to close up this hole as neatly and nicely as possible. Now, right now we're in April. We know we're gonna get rain. In fact, we might get rain tonight, if not tomorrow. So this is good. If you know that there's not gonna be rain for a long stretch of time, maybe within the week, then you should use a hose and water, and make sure that you water all this in so that it can penetrate down into the soil, and then the roots can take it up. And that is basically how we get these roses ready for summer.